I want to talk about creating a budget for a Catholic school. In order to create a budget that is effective, you need to start off with a very clear plan of action. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to review the key elements of creating a school budget and then walking you through a sample budget for an elementary and middle school and then a high school. This information is critical if you want to create a budget that will work. One of the worst things that we can do is simply create a budget based upon a certain percentage of last year's income and expenses, and simply increasing or decreasing those items by particular percentages. If you're going to have an effective budget, you need to understand why you're spending the money that you are spending during the course of the year. What's the rationale for it? I've seen too many schools over the year continue to spend money on particular items when they are not helping students. They are not helping the school accomplish its mission and its vision. You do it because it was done in the past, and that's what we do. If you're going to really lead a school to financial viability, you need to spend the time and energy to gather data, analyze the data, communicate with the key stakeholders that you have, and then create a budget that is realistic and, most importantly, accomplishes what you set out in terms of the mission of the school, the vision of the schools, and the goals for success. Another key element is the evaluation and the monitoring of that budget throughout the course of the year. So, again, over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the spreadsheets that will hopefully prepare you to create a budget that makes sure that your school is financially viable for years to come. When creating your budget, the first thing you need to do is review your school's mission statement. Because everything that you do in your budget should reflect on the mission of the school. It also needs to be in line with your vision as the head of the institution, your vision for what the school can and should be. So as you start looking at creating your own school's budget, those are the first 2 points that you have to make sure that you fully understand and grasp. Now, once you feel comfortable with those 2 items, then you begin the planning process. That planning process involves an examination and collection, most importantly, the collection of data. You need to look at enrollment. You need to look at your past enrollment. You need to look at current enrollment and future projections. It must be based upon fact. Now, what you decide on in terms of your enrollment should be closely aligned with the number of applications that you've had over the last few years, the number of individuals that have called, the number of individuals that have come to your school's open house. All of those factors have to be put together to make sure that you have accurate estimates, because again, all of these things that we're putting together are estimates that are then folded into the budget. Once we know our enrollment, we look at salaries. We need to look at our salary scale, our compensation philosophy, where we hope to be in relationship to other schools, and what you need to do to get there. Does that mean you need to change your salary scale? Do you need to upgrade the steps? Do you need to add more to the annual cost of living factors? All of those things have to be studied and a decision has to be made in terms of the salary scale that you have for the coming year, as well as taking a look at those folks that are off the scale, both teachers as well as support staff, and determine what will you need in terms of salary dollars. You then need to look at the benefits. What are the costs of the benefits? That includes health. That includes life insurance, disability insurance, workman's compensation, as well as retirement benefits. All of those have to be factored in. What's the increase that you're expecting for the next year and the next perhaps 5 years when you're doing a 5-year budget? Tuition. What has your tuition been? When you look at analyzing tuition, you have to examine where you've been, where you need to be, and taking a look at what will the market bear. Because you could say, I really need to raise my tuition, which is now $6,000 to $10,000 to really do all the things that I want. That might be nice, but the reality is, how can you make that happen? And will you lose students as a result of that? So that has to be factored into your tuition analysis and the data that you collect. What programmatic needs do you have? Are you looking at adding new programs? Are you looking at changing programs that you have within the context of your academic programs? That same thing would also go in terms of if you have an athletic program. Are you adding sports? Are you deleting sports? What are your programmatic needs? What about your overall staffing needs? As you look at your programmatic needs, do you need to increase staff? Do you need to decrease staff? Do you need to decrease staff because you anticipate a drop in enrollment? What about your capital needs? Are there major capital items that you need to make sure that the school is competitive, as well as considering the safety and well-being of the entire community? You have to look at the technology. Is your infrastructure strong enough? So you need to do a technology needs analysis. You have to look at maintenance, okay? With over the last few years, schools have had a lot of problems with outbreak of the flu. You have to look at your own cleaning and maintenance needs and say, what do we need to do? Do we need to increase the number of people that we have cleaning the building every day to ensure that we are doing everything we can to keep outbreaks from happening in your school? You also have to take a look at again, technology/security needs. In this day and age, more and more important to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone in the school building. Next thing you have to do in your planning process is determine how much of community involvement do you want. Do you want to just have a select group of people that you ask? How will you gather the data and get input in terms of the needs of the school? Is that by way of an annual survey that you send out? That might be one way to do it. Asking people how they feel about certain things within the school. You have to establish a timetable. You have to look at budget assumptions. After you've gotten all the data, you have to come up with what are the basic assumptions that I have about the coming year. That, again, the assumption would be that the tuition will increase by 3%. The assumption is that the salaries will increase by 2%. And you have to set those assumptions up. And then you also have to look at the budget evaluation process. How will you monitor the budget once it's implemented? How is that on a monthly basis, semi-annual, or annual basis? Those are things that you have to make sure that you consider and spell out as you're looking at creating a school budget. Now, in terms of the budgets that you have, now, if you have a parent-teacher organization, you might have a sub-budget, if you will, for them. This is one from a school, Catholic school, St. Eugene's. In they basically asked, parents to pay dues. You can see right here with the number of 5,000, 275,000. That's what their PTO dues are. They have a golf tournament. They raise $10,800, and you see all the different things that are outlined there. Now, what's interesting is when you come down here, you need to get this group to look at their expenses. So you say the golf tournament, it's going to cost us $6,100. Now, what you notice over in this year's budget, in the 16-17 budget for this school, they have eliminated that golf tournament. Why? Because they evidently felt that it wasn't as productive as they would want. Now, again, you look at this fun run, they look at $6,435 income, and they're going to spend close to $3,000. So you have to look at all of the numbers up here in terms of revenue and look at your expenses. Now, what's really interesting is here, after all of these things that took place, they're only netting $5,300. Now, in my estimation, that's an awful lot of energy that's being expended by members of the school community for a very small amount of money. Now, some of those things might make people feel good, but the reality is you have to look at the amount of time that it takes to do these things. So, again, if you have a parent-teacher organization, you would want them to create a budget. If you're in a high school and you're asking the department chairs, you're asking them to look at it. Now, in most cases, they don't have revenue. They basically have expenses. But again, you're asking people to look at what they want, what they need, and then build a budget from there. Now, I want to take a look at another option. And this is an actual budget that a school created. This is the template. After collecting all the data on their budget, they list the top 9 budget assumptions. So anybody looking at their budget will know what the assumptions are. Now, in this particular case, you've got a budget for 5 years. So they're creating a 5-year budget. Now, what you need to do is look at things like tuition, in parish, out of parish, Catholics, non-Catholics, scholarship assistance, registration fees. So as you look at creating a budget yourself, which you're going to be asked to do later on in this course, these are the things that you're going to have to start thinking about. Now, in order to make these decisions on these particular line items, you have to have facts to back it up. Your registration fees, what are you basing that on? Well, that's on the number of new students that you have, perhaps, or maybe you charge everybody, returning as well as new, a registration fee of $100 or $200 a year that's non-refundable. Are there any course fees? What about, if you're, pre-K tuition, nursery tuition, if you have after-school programs, which a lot of the elementary schools have, what are you anticipating for that? So then you go down and say, what about tuition assistance? Are you anticipating tuition refunds that at some point you will lose students during the year? Do you think that you're going to have uncollectible tuition? If your school has a habit of having uncollectible tuition, it's a good thing to make sure that you budget that in. Because otherwise, at the end of the year, you're not going to have enough money to pay all your bills. You might not have enough money to pay those bills during the course of the school year. Does your parish give you any support? Perhaps you have a school that is technically owned or operated by multiple parish. What about that? So you have to look at that. Parents' organizations. This is the other sources of revenue, the fundraising, development, parents organization, any grants from outside agencies, annual giving, major gifts, special events. Perhaps you have an endowment and you're able to take 5% of that endowment and add that to your operating budget every year if the endowment is set up that way. What about any bequests or memorials? Do you anticipate that? Some schools have a program where they rent their facilities, or they have summer programs. Sometimes schools, as they have old desks and they're replacing them with new desks, they sell the old desk for $1 or $2 a piece just to get some additional revenue. So again, as you look at this budget, you'll see all of the different line items that you have to consider, that you as the head of the school have to clearly understand where in this case, all of your revenue is coming from. Now, you get down to the expense categories and you start looking at administrative salaries, staff salaries, teacher salaries, other instructional salaries, for instance, the tech coordinator, the librarian, media specialist. What about extracurricular salaries if you have coaches or moderators of activities? What about substitutes? Everybody needs substitutes during the course of the year. What do you do to make sure that you have enough money to cover it when your teachers are out sick? Again, this is where you look at what about your FICA costs, dental insurance. Now, in some cases, people would say this would leave this blank because we don't offer dental insurance or we don't offer life insurance. But again, you have to make sure that you've factored those in. Contributed services. That would be if you have a member of a religious congregation working at your school and they take a reduced salary. So you put the difference here between what they would be making and what they actually are making. So you'll see all of these various categories. Again, faculty travel to conventions, depreciation on capital equipment. That means you're planning the obsolescence of everything because everything in your building will have to be replaced at some point. Instructional supplies, materials, and so on. Now, as you go down and you quickly look at these, you'll see there's a lot of elements that you need to consider. You need to make sure that you plan for all of these different things. Now, in most budget scenarios, and this is what I always found very helpful, is that when you, at the end of the day, you look at your expenditures, you look at your net surplus. Are you going to have a deficit, or are you going to have a break-even budget, or are you going to make a few dollars? Now, some things that in the planning process and this type of scenario would help. You look at, for instance, in a parish, what about baptisms? What about enrollment trends? What about tuition projections? So if you do these as subcategories and you start laying out all of the exact numbers, teacher salaries, who are your teachers? What are your costs for all of these? And then you can put those into your main budget. Same with administrative positions. What's your cost of your administration? Capital improvements, anticipated costs. When are you going to do that? Major technology expenses, advancement income. You have to make sure that you consider all of these various items and then ultimately put those back into your budget. Now, that was an example of an elementary or middle school. Now, the high school budget is a little bit different. Again, you start off with the assumptions. You look at tuition. If you have a special education program, do you charge extra money for that? Most high schools have student fees or class dues, retreat fees. So this type of budget, you'll look at again. What are the re-registration fees, application fees, testing fees? When you have AP or IB classes, what are the testing from that? Again, you're looking at advancement. What about any income from alumni events? Are there restricted gifts that you anticipate? Are there capital gifts? Someone wants to to donate a truck or a tractor, or maybe they want to pay for a new roof for the school or a new wing, whatever it would be. The capital gifts would be there. Again, school store income. Most high schools have school stores, uniform income, dining services, vending machines. If you have a school bus, you look at that. Other income. Some schools have what they call birthday clubs, where the library, if a parent donates a book, the cost of a book, $25. That's on their child's birthday. It's a way to make the parent feel good, or maybe there's an aunt, uncle, or grandparent who wants to do something for the child, for your student. That's a way to do it. Student government associations. Are there any activities? Are there dances? Are there those types of activities? A lot of high schools have college fairs. What about the income from that? Transcript fees from graduates, rental income for fields, for the gymnasiums, and so forth. Parking. Most high schools have issues with parking. Again, what about parking fines, parking permits? Do you charge students to be able to park on campus? Membership income, if you have an athletic or band boosters or music boosters, what about those things? Yearbook, athletic gate income, miscellaneous income, department income, financial aid income. So you'll see all of these things. And then in this particular scenario, it breaks it down into instructional, professional development, instructional materials. And again, that's where every department puts in their particular amounts, and it's totaled up there. Software maintenance fees, advertising, publications. Do you send out a quarterly or semi-annual annual report or magazine of some type? Computer technology expenses. What about the cost of your website, your infrastructure that support the academics? Again, you see there the athletic expenses. You'll see advancement expenses because, yes, you're going to be raising money, but there's a cost to doing that. Admissions. What about the cost of getting people into your school? And then you have this large category here, which is the salaries for all of the different folks in your building. And then you'll see their healthcare and so forth. So again, and then you'll have general administrative if you have to pay a diocesan or archdiocesan fee. What about those things? What about, again, the telephone expenses? If you're using voice over IP, what's the charge that you have for that, if there is any? What about debt service? This was mentioned by a few folks throughout the semester. Again, capital expenses, and then service. And then again, you look at your net, which is your profit or loss. Now, again, it's best if you look at these from enrollment projections, tuition projections, similar to what I mentioned in terms of the elementary or middle school, admissions, salary projections, advancement salaries projections. This gives you a really good idea about what it costs to run these particular offices. What about athletic department? This is where you put down all the coaches, athletic trainers, support folks that you have. What about dining services? What about the cost of the finance office? Now, this generally is done at the parish level by their business office, but in the high schools, most have their own finance department. What about the cost of the guidance department? How many guidance counselors do you have? Again, subset of looking at your information technology. Then you start looking at things like teacher salary projections, maintenance department. How many folks do you have in maintenance? So again, this is where the planning comes in. School store, what's the cost of keeping that open? Campus ministry, this is often overlooked. Administrative salary projections. And then again, you go to things like the capital projections, and then major technology. Again, when you look at preparing a budget, all of these things have to come into play. And quite honestly, throughout the course of the the past few months, we've been talking about all of these different items. The idea is that when you look at creating a budget, you have to do a great deal of prep work. And ultimately, you as the head of school will make a decision about each one of these categories and sign off on those. And then your challenge is to make sure that you stay within the confines of the budget. I hope the presentation today has helped you understand how to put all the various pieces of creating a school budget together in a unified package that makes sure that you accomplish the mission of your institution as well as maintaining the financial viability and stability of your institution for years to come. Remember, as the head of the school, it rests on your shoulders to ensure that your school is there for years to come. The challenge is yours. The question is, how will you meet it? I appreciate you listening.